Greetings, Jeepers. So what we're going to do here is finally get this steering box put together. The first thing that we're going to have to do here is set frost. They call it a frost plug, but it's a plug that sits right in this position. And to do that, we're first going to apply some Right Stuff PERMATEX gasket maker. So we're just going right around inside of where that plug is going to seat. Now this 1 1/4 OD outside the diameter plug will just set right in there. On top of the Right Stuff, a square end punch, and we're going to put that on top of the plug in the middle and give it a couple good blows, and what that will do is expand the plug so that it seats in that hole. So now you can see we just hammered that in a little bit and it expanded the plug. And now we're just going to apply a little bit of white or right stuff around the outside.
Once you apply your Right Stuff gasket maker to your frost plug here, just smear it out so you make a good seal. And same with the inside too. Just use your finger and just make sure the gasket sealer is smeared and it's fully covered all the cracks so your steering box won't leak. Now it is time to install our steering box bearings. So you want to install our cup facing this way. So we're going to stick it into our steering box and seat it into that groove at the very bottom. It can just be pushed in and it will push and seat all the way down to the bottom. And now we have our bearings, are the more modern type. And you want to have it so your bearings are riding in your cup. So your bearings will have to be installed this way, facing downwards. Now with our bearings, we have to install our bearings onto our worm gear at the very bottom here and make sure they're in the right direction. So you have the balls facing downwards or towards the bottom of your worm gear, and just slide them onto your worm gear like that. It'll fit in this little groove, and just make sure none of your balls fall out of this plastic housing, as you don't want to lose any of these bearings.
So now what we want to make sure that you get your shims on before you put the worm tube into the steering box. This is kind of a over and over process, and there's packs you can get. There are various thicknesses, and I have done this numerous times here with this steering box to fit them properly. But you want to get them on now because you won't be able to get them on later. And the whole reason of these shims is that when you tighten the worm gear at the top, you don't want any play in the worm gear itself. So that's the purpose of these shims. And you need to work with that. May take you a few times to get these shims the right thickness so that there is no up and down movement in this worm gear. So you eliminate as much slop as you can by getting these shims tight to the box.
Once you have your worm gear installed into your raw steering box, I would put on your 3 screws that hold your top mounting plate, just to hold all the bearings and your worm gear in place. Now it's time to install our 7/8 sector shaft into our raw steering box, and we'll just push your sector shaft through the bushings and the seals that have already been installed into your steering box. Push your sector shaft through your bushings and your seal. It should be a snug fit, and it will just push all the way in until you get into the grooves of your worm gear. It is important that we center our sector shaft, so we don't want your sector shaft to be too much to the left or to the right. You want it to be dead center with your steering box. And a quick trick to do this is just to make a mark on your raw steering box and your sector shaft, so you know that your sector shaft is straight when your steering box is fully assembled and the cover is on.
So now what we're going to do is put the gasket sealant on the steering box. Just kind of muck that around.
With an even coat of gasket sealer on, now we will install our steering box gasket, and you want to have it so the gasket is facing this direction because it only goes one direction. Just push it on, and now you will put gasket number 2 sealer on top of your gasket before you put the cover on. Make sure that you put some ANAEROBIC gasket maker on all these 4 bolts that will hold on your cover for your raw steering box, because you don't want your steering box oil to seep through the threads of the bolts, and we want less oil leaks the better. So just put a little bit on each of these bolts. Don't want too much, but it's a nice good coating. And now we will install our cover. Now with your raw steering box side cover, we will install it onto the side of your steering box, and you want to have it so this flat end is towards the top and it all lines up with your gasket and the bolts. Now you just press it on, and now you have to line up the bolts, and you want the bolts that have your brass washers to be on the bottom of your steering box, and the 2 top bolts will just be normal lock washers. And the small brass washer looks like that. Now just push them through all the holes with your gasket maker on each bolt. Once you have all your 4 bolts securing your cover to your raw steering box, we will now torque these bolts, and you want to torque them to approximately 15 foot-pounds. Now we're going to loosen these screws that are holding on our top cover here, so we can put on our gasket maker so the oil doesn't seep through the threads. With a good amount of your ANAEROBIC gasket maker on these 3 bolts, we'll have your bolt and your good old-fashioned lock washer, and we'll put all 3 of these in the top cover and just line it up and thread all 3 of your bolts. Once you have your 3 bolts kind of hand tight, you can torque these bolts, and we'll go to about 10 to 15 foot-pounds. That is how you fully rebuild your Ross steering box with all the different components, the worm gear, sector shaft, fully torqued, it all sealed. And now we will get this Ross steering box installed into our Willys Jeep, and it will be installed into these 3 holes on the frame. Come back and check out our video related to how to install your Ross steering box.